Hello and welcome. I'm Michael, better known as Jedite83, and this is my Pagan vlog. Um, as always, you can visit my website / online book of shadows at wiccan.pw. And today, as part of our new series, I would like to discuss what is Wicca. And I know I have discussed this in the past in video number, I believe it was number 2. I have my notes over here. Yeah, video number 2, what is Wicca? And actually, let me get a little light for us to see. And while I stand by everything I said in that video, it was not a very good quality video. I was still kind of figuring out the format for this channel and figuring out how I want the microphone. It wasn't a good video, and I want to go ahead and try to make it again now that I've learned a little bit more about making these videos. And let's just jump right on it. So, as I mentioned in past videos, I follow the Wiccan religion, specifically the Corellian tradition of Wicca. I also practice witchcraft, which is different, which I've touched on in videos 15-6. No, never mind. And I will discuss the difference between Wicca and witchcraft later. They are not the same, even though some people will try to tell you they are. They are not. Excuse me. So Wicca, also known as Pagan witchcraft, yeah, I know, right? According to Wikipedia, it's a contemporary pagan new religious movement. What this means is that Wicca is a pagan religion, and we are a new religious movement. Wicca is not an ancient religion. Some sources, some books, some authors, people will tell you, Wicca stretches back to antiquity. No, religion can trace its history all the way back to the 1950s. We are a fairly new religion. That's why we are a contemporary new religious movement. But Wicca was founded or at least it went public in 1954 by its founder, Gerald Gardner, who was a retired British civil servant. Gardner himself had practiced for years and years prior, so most likely Wicca was developed, it was not likely, but it was developed prior to 1954, that's just when it went public. Wicca itself is a new religion, but the sources that it draws upon some of them do date back to antiquity. Some of them are turn of the 19th century, the turn of the 20th century, groups like the Golden Dawn and Thelema. But some sources that they drew upon to build Wicca do definitely date back to antiquity. Wicca itself as a religion does not have a central authority figure. Whereas Catholicism has the Vatican and the Pope, we do not have any such authority figure, and for most people in Wicca, that is not only perfectly fine, that is desirable. We don't want centralized authority. That said, there are some traditions, like the Corellian tradition that I follow, that do have a central authority, but it only is over that specific tradition of Wicca. So since we do not have a central authority to pass down standardized teachings, Wicca itself is a fairly diverse religion. How one Wiccan practices their faith is definitely different than how another one practices theirs. Sometimes it's a little different, sometimes it's much more different. A lot of what we do in common can be, because while we do things different, there's a lot of things that Wiccans do the same, because a lot of the teachings do come back to Gardner and to Doreen Valente. I think that's right. Who both published a number of books and had a number of secret written and oral teachings that were passed directly to their students, some of which did eventually get out. publicly. Wicca also has the benefit that we are a growing and evolving tradition. Unlike some that the core teachings are the same and they are just working to modernize it to the modern world, Wicca itself is still a new religion. We are still developing our religion. Um, so there are people on the front lines of what is new in Wicca and in the magic space. Weird. One topic, and I know technically it's magic and witchcraft, not exactly Wicca, um, but I recently was having a discussion with some friends about time magic, which is a new one that people are still developing, this particular branch of magic. And us Wiccans are on the front lines of this new development. um, so we are a growing and evolving tradition. Each new teacher does bring something new, not only to their students, but to the tradition, or to the religion as a whole. Now, I've mentioned Wiccan traditions. While Wicca itself does not have a centralized authority, we do have, let's call them schools of thought. We call them traditions. There are some traditions, usually known as British traditional Wicca, where any member of it can trace their lineage back to Gerald Gardner. So, this person was trained by this person, who was trained by this person, who was trained by this person, all the way back to Gardner. Or to at least back to one of his early students. These traditions are collectively referred to as British traditional Wicca. A good way to think of a tradition is like in Christianity has denominations where they all follow the same religion, but they all do things a little different. That is how traditions in Wicca work. We are following the same religion, just our exact interpretation, what we put focus on, is different tradition to tradition. Traditions that do not generally fall into British traditional are generally known as eclectic Wicca. The Corellian tradition that I belong to would fall under the category of eclectic Wicca. And there are a lot of traditions. Gardnerian is which is a British traditional. It's directly based on the teachings of Gardner. But then you have Alexandrian, you have Dianic. I don't know if Dianic's considered a traditional. That one's notable for being women only. You've got Blue Star Wicca. You have Central Valley. There is a lot of different ones, and each tradition tends to do things a certain way, and everyone within it is sort of similar. And each tradition may have its own central authority figure over how it works, but not all do. The Corellian tradition I have does have at the very top a high priest and a high priestess who effectively set the teachings for the entire tradition. There is above them a chancellor, which is one of the others, currently the high priest. But to be honest, the Corellian tradition I follow is more organized and more structured than many other traditions. Some are much more casual, much more relaxed. Some of them much more want to reject authority figures. But even within a specific tradition, you'll have individual groups, working groups such as coven is usually what they're called. Some call them temples. Whatever you call them, even within each individual tradition, those groups will do things a little different. And even the individual members inside of a coven or a temple, or even within that tradition as a whole, will do things their way and a little different. For example, and again, I speak about the Corellian tradition a lot because that is what I have the most experience with. However, I do want to mention here, and I've mentioned in other videos, I do not speak for the tradition officially. I'm speaking for me officially. And technically the Temple of the Cyber Mage, which is my own organization that I'm the head of. But for example, amongst the people, the practitioners that I work with on a regular basis, many of them do like the back to earth feel of Wicca. It is a very back to earth religion. And there's nothing wrong with that. That when I started, that was how I was too. Whereas in the same group, okay, let me put it this way. Okay, better way to put this. Okay, so in, let's say, just one specific group of people I meet with. Okay, we do have some people who are back to earth, very stereotypical Wicca. They'd rather be clearing in the forest, doing their thing. Perfectly fine. On the other hand, you have people like me where, and I know I mentioned this before, I have a USB drive on my altar because technology is part of my practice. My Book of Shadows is literally a website because that works for me. I have an app on my phone that I can pull up my Book of Shadows with. I do rituals on Zoom. I have incorporated technology into not only my practice, but into my ritual space. And that works for me. Some people think I'm totally crazy, I'm totally doing it wrong, because technology shouldn't even be in there. I know some people who won't even allow a wristwatch in sacred spaces that is too technology. Even if it's a mechanical one, they won't let it because that's too technology. It's their group, it's how they practice. That's fine for them, but that's not how I do it. And pretty much what I'm saying is no two Wiccans do things the same way. And that is something that I really do like about Wicca, is that you can practice it your way and you're not necessarily wrong. Before I was Wiccan, I was a Christian. I was Southern Baptist specifically, and Southern Baptist, like many other Christian denominations, like, here's how we do it. If you do it any other way, you're wrong. And that wasn't for me. It didn't work for me. So here I am. Okay. So what is Wicca? What do we believe? Okay. Wicca is a duotheistic religion. That means we follow primarily two deities. Duo is two. Theistic is theistic. We worship a goddess and a god. There are some exceptions, but those are specific traditions. Some Wiccans specifically follow only two, some follow many, some of them view many as aspects of the two, some see the many and the two as aspects of a even higher primordial deity, which is how I was taught. The view on divinity and the god and the goddess does very much differ. And the reason for this, and this is how I was taught, is that there is a the allegory of an allegory? Is that the right word? I'm not sure. I'm an armchair theologian, not a linguist, so if I screw up a word, I screw up a word. But how I was taught was to view divinity as a diamond, a cut diamond with many facets. The stone as a whole represents a single primordial deity, the primordial goddess who brought the universe into existence. She brought the universe into existence by splitting her soul, creating the feminine and the masculine, the spiritual and the physical. So the concept of just the goddess and the god are just manifestations of those two of that split and the two that resulted from it, the feminine, the spiritual feminine, and the physical masculine. And some people, this is just how they view divinity. That's fine. Some of them go further, which when you think back to the diamond, it's got all those faces. Each face is a unique look into the stone. A single facet of a cut stone is not the stone as a whole, it's just a part of it. A single window into the greater structure. And at least within the tradition that I was taught, that is how we see divinity. All the gods and all the goddesses of all the world's religions are just facets of an even larger, even greater primordial deity. And the reason that deity has all these different aspects or facets or manifestations, I don't know if that's the word I go with, but we're going to go with it, are just different ways that divinity, she chooses to reveal herself to us. For example, if somebody really, really wants to practice witchcraft and that stuff, the goddess may appear to them as goddess of witchcraft, like Hecate, or whereas somebody who really likes crafting things, or is a maker, she may appear to them in the form of Vulcan, the god of the forge, or if they are into hunting and animals, may appear as, I want to say Artemis. Is that the goddess of the hunt? I'm not sure. But the goddess does not need to present herself the same to everybody, but appears to them in a way that they can relate to. And it's because of this relation that a practitioner and their goddess can work together for the greater good. Now, knowing which goddess or god is calling to you, wants to be your patron deity, is not something you're going to discover the first day. I have been practicing for 20 years. I have had patron deities come and go, and that's not a bad thing when they go. It just means things are changing. It's time for you to learn a new lesson. It's time for you to grow and move on and expand. I know for me, and speaking personally here, for times when I am between patron deities, I simply pray to or practice my craft in the name of the goddess and the god. I speak generically, and the spirit that this needs to go to will hear it, even if I don't necessarily know the name specifically of who this needs to be addressed to. There's nothing wrong with this. There are some practitioners who will find a single or a group of patron deities and follow them forever, for the rest of their life, or for at least as long as they are following this path. Nothing wrong with that either. There are some who simply never do have or never seek a patron deity. Again, there is nothing wrong with this either. And if this all sounds confusing about how Goddess works, it kind of is, because with where we as spiritual beings are in our evolutionary step, I don't believe that we are at this point fully capable of understanding the full nature of deity. We as spiritual beings are just not there yet. And to touch on, I definitely do want to do this in a later video. What is the spirit of us as I will touch on now. What is the nature of us as a spiritual being? And the factor is, we are a piece of the goddess. Vangelo d'Estrée. The Vangelo tells us that in the beginning there was a primordial goddess, and the act of creating the universe, she splits her soul into the spiritual feminine, masculine, physical. That is the creation event of the universe. However, the spiritual goddess cannot directly enter the physical. So, and the story is a bit more complicated. If you do read the Vangelo, also called the Gospel of the Witches, it does go into it more, but that is a story full of allegory. And I struggle to read through it. But the goddess then pieces off pieces of her soul. That is our soul. That is the breath of life for us. So your soul, your spirit, is a piece of the goddesses. And when we leave the physical and return to the Summerland, the afterlife, it is our soul taking everything we've learned, everything we've experienced here in the physical, back to the goddess. And I definitely will go into afterlife stuff in a future video. It is a topic I don't really study a lot on my own, just because I don't. But I definitely do want to touch on it, because it is an interesting topic on its own. What else? As I've mentioned in past videos, I'm trying to make these videos are meant to be kind of 101 level, intro to Wicca for beginners, people who are just starting their first degree path. So if I don't go into depth on any one of these, no, I will later. I'm just trying to give people an intro. And I mentioned first degree, so let's go ahead and talk about degrees. So within Wicca, and more specifically within traditions, there are generally degrees. Let's say, and I'm going to describe this as, and I do apologize if I do compare a lot of things to Christianity. One, it's part of my background. Two, it's a common background for a lot of Wiccans. A lot of us do come from a Christian background. I do know some who were raised Wiccan. That's fine, but not all of us have that privilege. So, when you become a Christian, you're a Christian. And that's, for most people, that is the end of it. Some may go to school to move up in the ranks, but there really is, you're in or you're not. On Wicca, we do that too, but we are generally structured into degrees, usually 3 to 4 of them. Some organizations have more, but they are very few, best I can tell. At least within Wicca, there is some neighboring religions / magical systems like Golden Dawn and Thelema that definitely do have more, but, well, they would be pagan religions like us. They are not Wicca. But within the Krellian tradition, we generally have 3, let's call it 3.5. When you first join, you are a member of the outer court. You don't have a degree, you are just in the tradition. Then you can study and become a first degree. This means you met a minimum amount of training, and they have placed an amount of trust to say you are elevated to the first step of our thing. More training will bring you to the second step, more training will bring you to the third. In the Krellian tradition, many people are in the outer court, but once you become the first degree, you are actually a member of the clergy. You are a priest or a priestess. And then you can move up to be higher and higher as your training and your skills develop. Some traditions do things a little different, where clergy would only be the third, or maybe the second and third, and the first is not. Every tradition does things a little different. Every group within a tradition does things a little different. So I cannot speak in blanket terms easily, because it's not that easy. And what do Wiccans do? How do we practice our faith. Obviously, we do commune with deity. This could be through meditation, this could be through prayers, or spell work, or magic, which is... And I think that's why so many people think of Wicca and witchcraft as if they're the same when they're not. Wicca is a religion, witchcraft is a practice of magic, but many times we practice magic as part of our religion, so the two definitely do have a lot of overlap. And I will be doing a video on what is witchcraft and what is the difference between Wicca and witchcraft. They're probably my next two, and I'm not 100% sure yet. But in our practice, one of the common things you will see is going to be are celebrating the cycles of the moon, generally known as Espats, E-S-P-A-T-S. And these will generally be associated with the goddess. We also follow the cycles of the sun. This usually appears in season-based events known as Sabbats, S-A-B-B-A-T-S. And these are generally associated with the god. I know in my personal practice, I generally do 2 Espats a month, one for the new moon, one for the full moon. I do these with a group of people in a group that I belong to. We meet these on Zoom. And then I'll generally do the 4 big solar holidays, the big 4 solar Sabbats, which are the 2 equinox and the 2 solstice. There are the other 4 cross-quarter ones that many of those line up with harvest and planting dates back from when people were generally more of an agrarian society. Again, Wicca does draw its roots, even though Wicca's new, it draws from older stuff, so that does work in. I generally don't follow this as much because I live in a city. I'm not a farmer. I don't garden. I kill plants. Somebody who follows a lunar deity, however, may place most of their emphasis on Espats and very little on the solar holidays because they want to follow the moon. Whereas somebody who may follow a solar deity may be the opposite way around. Some people do both. I know for many years, even though I was still practicing, I didn't either because I didn't have the time or the energy, because I do deal with depression, and I've had times where it was much worse and I couldn't do anything because of it. But the emphasis on which holidays and which Espats and which Sabbats get followed are going to be based on an individual practitioner and how they practice their path. But while Wiccans have many things that are different, we do have many things in common. As I've said, there's a lot of things we do in common because we do draw from similar roots. And one of those roots that a lot of Wiccans do draw from is a thing known as the Wiccan Reed. I covered this back in video number 3. I think I just read it. And while not all Wiccans do follow the Wiccan Reed, a lot do. It's a long piece, but really it's the last 2 sentences that I think are the most important because they, I believe, encapsulate the heart, not just the heart, but the cornerstone of Wiccan ethics. 8 words this Wiccan Reed fulfill, and it harm none, do what ye will. And I know I definitely want to do a more in-depth one, but pretty much what this is saying, do what you will. To look at this backwards, do what you will. This could mean to do what you want, or follow your true will, your spirit's will, your spirit's desire. Could be another definition of will. But do what you will, but harm none. The easiest way to explain this would be, you there's nothing wrong with doing spell work, but don't hurt anyone while doing your spell work. Um, that'd be a quick and easy way to define it. Where people draw the lines on how this works is a little different. Some people say that the Wiccan Reed applies specifically to the craft, your spell work, your magic, your religion, but not to your outside mundane life. Some say it applies at all times. And I've seen quite a bit of debate. This is still something people um, debate, and debate vigorously, and not everyone sees eye to eye on it. I would say most Wiccans that I have met in my personal experience generally follow it and generally try to live their entirety of their life by it. There are a few other well-known writings in the community that certainly are common amongst a wide range of groups, but I would say the Wiccan Reed is certainly one of the widest spread ones. But if you're new to Wicca, hopefully I've given you a little taste of what is Wicca. If you want to learn more, obviously Wiccan.pw, my personal book of shadows, and the website for the Temple of the Cyber Mage. My temple that I'm running and setting up is located there. If you want to learn more about what is Wicca specifically, Wikipedia has a really good article. Just look up Wicca. I would also recommend The Truth About Witchcraft Today by Scott Cunningham. And I would recommend... Is this it? No, that's not it. Okay. Scott Cunningham. I'd recommend Scott Cunningham's book, Solitary Wicca, I think is the title. The one I just grabbed there was the sequel to it. Hold on, let me look. Wicca, Guide for the Solitary Practitioner. That's it. And then Living Wicca, which is kind of its sequel. That's the one I have on the shelf. I've lost my copy of Solitary Wicca in a move or something. This book's on Amazon. The other ones are much easier to find. This one's surprisingly a little hard. If you are new to Wicca, The Truth About Witchcraft Today, I do recommend this one if you have done very, very little research. I mainly recommend this one just so that people who come into the faith and want to learn, they don't expect it to be like what Hollywood portrays it as. Because Hollywood is, as always, wrong about everything. Whereas Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner and Living Wicca are really good foundational books of how we do things. Scott Cunningham is an excellent author. I recommend all of his books. It won't fit on the shelf. Okay. But I think that's all I have to say for the moment. I feel... So I appreciate you joining me. I'm Michael, better known as Jedite83. This is my Pagan vlog. This is my website. Although, and as I mentioned in the last video, I'm switching away from my Q&A session style videos to these more lecture style. But I do plan to still do videos doing Q&A, question and answers. So if you have questions, throw them in the comments or email me at webmaster@wiccan.pw, and eventually I will get around to doing Q&A videos. Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And as always, may you blessed be.